Why does a husband need every room in a house to prove he is loved? My ex had been drinking, his back was bad, and the guest room was already taken. Asking my husband to spend one night in a hotel was practical, not romantic. It was our 10th anniversary, but marriage does not make discomfort sacred. If one of them had to be uncomfortable, I chose the man who was already home. Arthur pressed the bedroom key into his palm, looked past me at the guests, and told me to enjoy my anniversary. I was certain everyone would sit down again once his little performance ended. My name is Ren Rowe. I am 38, and I direct admissions at a private school outside Boston. Most of my day is spent deciding who belongs where. Parents become emotional, but I stay calm, sort the facts, and make a decision. Arthur used to say he admired that skill. I could enter a confused room and give everyone a place. He was 40 and worked as a transit safety engineer. He found risks that everyone else missed, checked everything twice, and rarely raised his voice. We had been together for 12 years and married for 10. When my father had heart surgery, Arthur drove my mother to the hospital every morning. When I was promoted, he learned to make a lemon cake I missed from a closed bakery. I handled our social life and made quick choices. Arthur handled the quiet work that kept our days together. There was love in that arrangement, along with a problem I had stopped seeing. Arthur hated open conflict. During disagreements, he went quiet and returned later with a spreadsheet or a finished plan. He could organize a perfect weekend when I wanted him to say that I had hurt him. I told him care was not the same as a conversation. He agreed, kissed my forehead, and found another useful task. That habit made it easy for me to believe that silence meant permission. 3 weeks before our anniversary, I saw Damien at a school charity dinner. We had dated for almost 2 years in our 20s, then parted because we wanted different lives. After dinner, he sent a polite message. We exchanged a few notes about people we used to know. Damien said he would be nearby on the weekend of our party. I invited him before discussing it with Arthur. 12 years had passed, and I saw no reason for adults to fear an old chapter. Arthur was replacing a loose hinge on our bedroom door when I told him. His hand stopped on the screwdriver. He asked if I had already invited Damien. I said yes. Arthur lowered the tool and asked why my ex needed to be at our 10th anniversary. We're adults. It was years ago. Don't make it weird. He said the invitation made him uncomfortable. I reminded him that Fiona had invited a college boyfriend to a cookout. Arthur said a cookout was different from an anniversary. I told him rigid thinking made harmless things feel threatening. Arthur turned the little brass key in our old bedroom lock. He took it out, pressed it into his palm, then set it on the dresser. I thought he was being territorial. Even the key had become proof of his position. He finally said Damien could come because he did not want the whole evening to become an argument about one guest. I heard the answer I wanted and ignored the reason he gave. During the next 2 weeks, Arthur asked 3 times if I had renewed my expired passport. We had no trip planned, so I told him to stop managing me. He apologized and did not mention it again. Gemma, my closest friend, called the invitation modern and brave. She said it would show how secure Arthur and I were. I liked that idea. To me, security meant Arthur would not make me change a choice just because it hurt him. The Saturday of our anniversary, I left for a hair appointment and lunch with Gemma. Arthur stayed to prepare the house. He had offered to hire a caterer, but I said people preferred his cooking. Our friends praised it so often that I no longer thought of the work as a favor. When Gemma and I returned, Arthur had moved the table near the windows and set low candles between white flowers. 10 photographs stood on the mantel, one from each year of our marriage. The first showed us outside City Hall in the rain. In the last, we were laughing while our dog pulled at the leash. Wine cooled in the kitchen beside rosemary bread and small pies. Arthur had labelled the food Maeve's little boy could eat and repaired the light where Fiona once tripped. Every detail held a memory, but I walked around checking the flowers and chairs. I told Arthur the table looked good. He smiled and asked if good was all he got after 5 hours. I kissed his cheek, called him needy, and went upstairs to change. The bedroom door was closed. When I tried it, the lock caught for half a second before opening. Arthur appeared behind me and said he had put part of my present inside, so I should stay out until later. The brass key hung from a blue ribbon around his finger. I laughed and asked if he thought I would search my own bedroom like a child. He said he hoped to surprise me after the cake. He looked quietly excited, with flour near his wrist and a small burn on one thumb. Instead of thanking him for the day, I said he should change before people saw him looking like kitchen staff. Arthur's face tightened. Then he smiled and said he would be ready. Wesley and Fiona arrived early and helped with chairs. Maeve brought her 6-year-old son, Toby. Her sitter had cancelled, so they could use the guest room if he became tired. By 6, 14 adults filled the house. Damien arrived last. He brought a bottle of expensive red wine and a small olive tree in a clay pot. He hugged me, shook Arthur's hand, and said he appreciated the invitation. Arthur was polite. He took Damien's coat and asked what he wanted to drink. Nothing in Arthur's voice was rude, but I could feel his attention follow us as I introduced Damien to the room. I decided that Arthur was watching because he expected a problem. That made me more determined to prove there was none. I poured Damien's wine myself, even though Arthur was filling glasses. When the first tray of food came out, I carried it to Damien before I offered it to Maeve or Fiona. Damien had recently moved back after several years in Chicago, so people asked about his work and his time away. I sat near him to keep the conversation easy. Whenever a pause appeared, I filled it with a story from our 20s. The stories were harmless at first. Damien had taken the wrong train, and we had ruined a borrowed tent in a storm. The room laughed. I enjoyed bringing out this younger version of myself. Arthur carried warm plates from the kitchen while I told those stories. Once, he tried to add something about the first apartment we had shared. I talked over him because Damien had just remembered the name of the terrible band at that concert. Arthur waited, then took the empty tray away. Gemma laughed louder than anyone in the beginning. She leaned toward me and said the whole thing was going better than Arthur had feared. Later, she asked if I wanted help in the kitchen. I told her Arthur had it under control. She looked toward him, standing alone by the sink, and said that was not what she meant. I ignored the comment. During dinner, Arthur thanked everyone for filling our house with people who had known us at different times. He said 10 years of marriage had taught him that a life was built from ordinary days. His glass shook slightly. I thought he was nervous about the gift. I answered with a joke about how many ordinary days it had taken him to learn where I kept the good towels. Everyone laughed, including Arthur. Then I asked Damien to tell the story of a hotel in Montreal where the fire alarm had gone off during our trip. The joke changed the air. Fiona put down her glass, and Maeve looked toward Arthur. Damien shortened the story and left out the part I had been waiting for. Arthur touched my shoulder as he passed behind me. His hand stayed there for 1 second. He asked if I could come to the kitchen. I followed him, already annoyed that he had chosen a moment when everyone could notice. In the kitchen, he kept his voice low. He said that every memory I had shared that night came from my relationship with Damien. I told him people were interested because Damien had been away. Arthur asked me to spend the rest of our anniversary beside him instead of beside my ex. The request should have been easy, but his words felt like an order. I said I would sit where the conversation was best. He answered that he was asking his wife to notice him. I looked through the kitchen doorway. Gemma and Fiona were pretending not to watch us. I felt judged, and I blamed Arthur for making our private tension visible. I told him he had spent all day creating a performance and now wanted me to follow his script. His mouth opened, but no answer came. After a moment, he said the dinner was not a performance. Then he returned to the dining room and brought out the cake. It was the lemon cake from my promotion, topped with 10 blue sugar flowers. Everyone sang. Arthur stood beside me as I cut the first slice. Damien lifted his phone, and I turned toward him without thinking. In the photograph, Arthur was only a shoulder at the edge. After cake, The evening softened again. Toby fell asleep upstairs. Maeve checked on him and said they would stay in the guest room because moving him would wake him. Wesley and Fiona offered to help Arthur clean. I opened the wine Damien had brought. Damien said he should probably stop drinking. He had planned to leave his car and call a ride, but he lived almost an hour away. I told him not to worry yet. It was our anniversary, and nobody needed to rush home. Arthur heard me and said there were several hotels 10 minutes away. He even offered to call one and arrange a car. Damien said that would be fine if he could not drive later. The matter could have ended there. Instead, I saw Arthur's offer as a public effort to remove Damien. I wanted him to understand that he could not turn a normal problem into a victory. Gemma asked me quietly if Damien might take the sofa. I said we had plenty of time to decide. The party should have ended at 11. At 11:15, people were still finishing coffee while Arthur stacked dishes in the kitchen. Damien stood from the sofa and put one hand against his lower back. He had injured it moving boxes the month before, and the soft seat had made it stiff. He laughed about getting old, but his face showed real pain. I told him he could stay with us. Arthur came through the kitchen doorway with 2 cups in his hands. He said the sofa opened into a bed and there were clean sheets in the hall cabinet. Damien said the sofa would be more than enough. He looked embarrassed to need anything. Maeve reminded us that she and Toby were in the guest room. Fiona offered to drive Damien to a hotel. Wesley said he could follow in Damien's car so it would not be left on the street. Every practical answer was already in the room. I rejected each one. The sofa was too soft for Damien's back. A car ride across town would be uncomfortable. A hotel on a Saturday night was wasteful when we had a perfectly good bed upstairs. I spoke with the confidence I used when parents at school tried to debate a placement after I had made it. There was a sensible solution, and everybody needed to stop turning it into an emotional test. Arthur placed the cups on the sideboard. He asked which bed I meant. I said ours. For a moment, he honestly seemed to think I was joking. A few people laughed once, then stopped. Arthur asked where I expected us to sleep. I said I would take the sofa and he could use a hotel. He stared at me as if I had switched languages. You can get a hotel for one night. He needs an actual bed. Damien said my name and started to explain that he did not need our room. I lifted a hand because I thought he was being polite. I told him his back would be worse by morning and that there was no reason for 3 adults to suffer just to protect Arthur's pride. Arthur asked the question slowly. He wanted to be sure that I was sending him out of his own home on our 10th anniversary so my ex could sleep in our bedroom. I said he was making everything about himself. It was literally one night. Damien was my guest, and Arthur needed to stop embarrassing me. Nobody moved. The music had ended several minutes earlier, so I could hear the refrigerator and the small sounds of people breathing. Arthur looked around the room. His eyes stopped on Wesley, then Maeve, then me. He asked if I had considered staying in a hotel with him and letting Damien have the room, if the bed was truly the only issue. I said somebody needed to stay in the house with Maeve and Toby. Arthur said Maeve was an adult. I answered that he was missing the point on purpose. He asked what the point was. My answer came before I thought about it. If one of you has to be uncomfortable tonight, I'd rather it be you. Gemma whispered something under her breath. Fiona covered her mouth with one hand. Damien stepped away from me. Arthur did not raise his voice. He did not insult Damien. He did not tell the guests what I had said in the kitchen. He looked toward the stairs, and for the first time that night, I remembered the present waiting in our room. He went upstairs alone. I stood in the living room with my arms folded. I told everyone that Arthur needed a minute. My face felt hot, but I held a small smile because I did not want his mood to control the party. Damien repeated that he could take a car. I told him the plan was settled. Arthur returned wearing his jacket. He carried a small overnight bag that he used for work trips. The brass bedroom key lay in his open hand. He closed his fingers around it until the metal pressed into his skin. Then he put it on the hall table beside our anniversary cards. He removed his wedding ring. At first, I thought he meant to place it beside the key. Instead, he slipped it into his pocket. That small choice frightened me more than shouting would have, so I turned it into another complaint. I asked whether he was really going to punish everyone with a dramatic exit. Arthur looked past me at the half-empty glasses, the photographs on the mantel, and the people waiting for him to speak. Okay. Then enjoy your anniversary. He walked out. The front door shut without a slam. Cold air crossed the hall and made the candle flames move. I waited for someone to make a joke. I even lifted the bottle and asked who wanted more wine. Wesley put on his coat. I told him Arthur would calm down. Wesley said he was going to make sure his friend did not spend the night alone. Fiona helped him find his scarf. I asked if they were seriously leaving because Arthur had thrown a tantrum. Fiona looked at me for a long moment. No, we're leaving because you just threw your husband out of his own home for your ex. She and Wesley left together. One of the couples followed them. The husband carried the dish he had brought, and his wife did not look at me while she buttoned her coat. I said people were overreacting to a sleeping arrangement. Neither answered. Maeve came downstairs with Toby asleep against her shoulder. I told her she had no reason to go. She had the guest room, and moving Toby at that hour was cruel. She said she would rather wake her son than let him grow up, thinking that what he had just heard was how married people treated each other. I accused her of using a child to shame me. Maeve said I had done enough without her help. Then she carried Toby outside. 2 more friends collected their bags. Gemma stayed near the fireplace, rubbing her thumb along the edge of her phone. I looked at her for support. She had encouraged the invitation. She had called it proof that Arthur and I were secure. Before she could speak, Fiona turned back from the doorway. Her voice was quiet enough that nobody could pretend she was putting on a show. You keep treating him like he's lucky. You chose him. Tonight, you proved you never understood which one of you was lucky. The words landed hard because they came from Fiona. She was not close to Arthur in a way I could call suspicious. She loved Wesley openly, and Wesley loved her. She had watched our marriage from a safe distance for years. I wanted to tell her she had confused kindness with weakness, but the door closed before I formed the sentence. Within 10 minutes, 14 adults had become 3. The last couple apologized to Damien before leaving, as if he were the person I had placed in danger. Nobody apologized to me. For a few seconds after the front door closed, I stood with the wine bottle in my hand. Candles still burned beside the open cake. The coats were gone, but the rooms held the warmth of everyone who had left. Damien was by the sofa. Gemma remained near the fireplace. Neither of them looked comfortable. I said everyone had chosen Arthur's feelings over common sense. I expected Damien to agree. After all, the fight had supposedly been about giving him a safe place to sleep. He did not agree. I never asked you to kick him out. I said I had made a practical decision because he was in pain. Damien replied that practical choices included the person whose bed was offered. He had accepted a ride, a hotel, or the sofa, but I kept closing doors until only Arthur's remained. I said Arthur often needed time to stop taking things personally. By morning, he would see that nothing romantic had happened. Damien asked why I kept defending against an affair that nobody had accused us of having. I had built my defense against jealousy, but Damien refused to act like a rival. He said I had shown Arthur that his place could be given away whenever keeping it became inconvenient. Gemma asked if we could stop and clean up. Her eyes were wet. I told her not to act shocked after she had supported inviting Damien. She said she had supported dinner, not this. She had expected me to include my husband, not spend the night proving that he could not object. I reminded her that Arthur could have stayed. Nobody had forced him to leave. Gemma looked toward the empty hook where his coat had been and said I had told him I preferred his discomfort in front of everyone he loved. Staying would not have made that disappear. I took the bedroom key from the hall table. Its teeth had pressed into Arthur's palm, and I read his grip as anger. Then I told Damien I would show him why the bed made sense. He asked me not to. I was already walking upstairs. Fresh sheets covered the bed, with 2 folded robes at the foot. One blue flower stood beside my pillow. A packed suitcase waited on Arthur's side. At first, I thought he had planned to leave before the argument. Then I saw the blue travel folio on the dresser. My initials were stamped in silver on the front. Beneath it sat a matching passport cover and 2 tickets. Arthur had planned 8 days in Lisbon and Porto, starting the following Thursday. He had booked a river hotel, a train north, and a class for the custard pastries I loved. The card explained his passport reminders. He had arranged my leave with my assistant and planned to take me to the airport hotel after the party. The room had been the first step of the surprise. Damien stopped in the doorway. He said Arthur had kept people out because the gift was private. The key had protected the surprise while Arthur decided whether there was still something to give me. I said the trip did not change the way he had behaved downstairs. My voice sounded thin even to me. Damien asked what behaviour I meant. Arthur had cooked, hosted, offered a hotel, and left when I told him to leave. I picked up the passport cover. The leather was soft and smelled new. My initials, WR, were neat under my thumb. I said Arthur should have told me about the trip instead of testing me with secrets. Damien replied that a surprise gift was not a test. I turned on him. I said he had accepted my invitation, my food, and my offer to stay, so he did not get to judge me from a doorway. Damien nodded once. He said that was fair. Then he told me he would call a car and go home. He collected his coat and refused my offer to order his ride. At the door, he said our old relationship had not invited him into the centre of my marriage. He did not want to prove that Arthur had no right to a boundary. Damien left before midnight. Gemma was washing glasses when I came downstairs. I set the blue folio on the counter and told her about Portugal. She covered her face for a second. Then she asked where Arthur might be. I said he was probably with Wesley, enjoying the attention. Gemma stopped washing. She told me to call him. I did. The call went directly to voicemail. My message said the guests had gone and Damien was leaving. It contained no apology, only a question about whether Arthur was coming home. There was no answer. Gemma put on her coat. I accused her of choosing the safe side after helping me start the whole thing. She said she would own her part, but she would not help me blame Arthur. When she left, the house became painfully neat. Arthur had washed every pan as he cooked. The guests had carried most of their dishes away. Only glasses, plates, and crushed napkins showed that a party had happened. I sat at the dining table and opened the photographs on my phone. In most of them, Damien was beside me. Arthur appeared behind a tray near the kitchen door or at the edge of the frame. The photograph with the cake was the best one of me. My hair looked good, the blue sugar flowers were clear, and Damien was smiling as he held the phone. Arthur's shoulder could be removed with one crop. I knew posting it would look strange. I also knew people had already begun talking. Maeve would tell our mother. Wesley would tell the rest of Arthur's friends. If I stayed silent, their version would become the only version. After cropping the picture, I posted it with a short line thanking everyone who had celebrated 10 years with us. The caption said the night had taken an unfortunate turn because some people had mistaken hospitality for disrespect. Arthur was not named. The bedroom and Damien's refusal were left out. The first response came from a parent at my school who knew nothing about the evening. She wrote that I looked beautiful. I held on to that comment as if it proved the post had worked. Several guests saw it and said nothing. Fiona removed her earlier heart from another anniversary photo. Maeve sent one private message asking me to take the post down before I made the night worse. I did not answer. At 2 a.m, Arthur sent 4 words. He said he was safe with Wesley. There was no pet name and no promise to come home. I slept on my side of our bed. I left his side untouched, as though Damien's refusal had restored the room to what it had been. The blue passport cover sat on my nightstand. In the dark, the silver initials caught light from the street. Arthur came back on Tuesday evening with Wesley. After 3 nights, I had arranged my points in the order I planned to make them. He and Wesley arrived just after 6. Arthur used his key to enter, but he knocked first. That felt insulting. It made the house seem like a place he no longer trusted. Wesley stayed near the front door while Arthur went upstairs with 2 empty bags. I followed him. I said we needed to talk without an audience. Arthur answered that Wesley was there to help carry his things, not listen. He packed clothes, medicine, running shoes, and a photograph of his parents. His calm made my prepared speech feel too large for the room. I told him that leaving for 3 days was not how adults solved a conflict. He said sending a spouse to a hotel was not how adults celebrated an anniversary. I said that he knew what I meant. The room was only a room, and Damien had not even used it. Arthur folded a sweater before answering. Damien's final choice did not erase mine. I had rejected every other solution because I wanted Arthur to yield in front of everyone. I said I had wanted the night to stay friendly. Arthur had watched me punish each sign of his discomfort. The old stories, my seat beside Damien, and the bedroom all asked how much he would surrender before I believed he loved me. I said he was turning one bad decision into a story about our whole marriage. Arthur closed the first bag. He said the story had started long before the party. I often decided what was reasonable, then treated his feelings as evidence that he was unreasonable. He had made that easier by going quiet. His silence had trained me to expect surrender, and my certainty had trained him to hide inside plans. I looked at the blue travel folio on the dresser. I told him I had found his surprise. He said he knew because the airline had sent a notice when I opened the itinerary link. That embarrassed me, so I attacked the gift. I told him 8 days in Portugal did not fix the fact that he had stopped speaking honestly to me. He had arranged my leave with my assistant without asking. He had chosen the cities, the hotel, and the dates alone. For years, he had offered finished plans whenever I needed his actual presence. He built perfect solutions in secret, then expected gratitude to replace a hard conversation. Arthur sat on the edge of the bed. For the first time since he entered, he looked directly at me. He said I was right. The answer stopped me. He admitted that planning made him feel useful and safe. He could check a reservation, unlike the effect of a difficult sentence. When I became sharp, he chose tasks that could not laugh at him or call him needy. Portugal had also let him avoid asking what had happened between us. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. I had wanted him to admit his part, and he had. There was a narrow opening in front of us. I could have admitted mine without losing the truth of what I had said about him. Instead, I used his honesty as a shield. I said that if he knew he had failed to communicate, he could not place the anniversary entirely on me. Arthur said he was not asking me to carry everything. He was asking me to carry what I had done. He offered one path forward. He wanted me to remove the photograph and correct the story I had posted. The correction had to say, Damien never asked for our room and tried to refuse it. It also had to admit, to the people who watched, that I displaced my husband because I wanted to prove he would give way. To me, that was public humiliation. Arthur said the humiliation was already public. A correction would simply be accurate. He did not ask me to describe our private argument or beg anyone for forgiveness. He wanted me to stop using a cropped picture to suggest that the guests had punished harmless hospitality. I asked whether he would come home if I did it. He said he would come to counselling and have an honest conversation. He could not promise the result before the work began. That was not enough for me. I wanted the post to buy certainty and restore my position. Counselling sounded like a room where he could repeat Fiona's judgment while I paid to listen. I told him I would not confess to motives he had invented. I had been stubborn, but I had not been testing his obedience. He asked why I had rejected Fiona's ride, Wesley's plan, the sofa, and the hotel he had offered to pay for. I answered that I did not like the way he had tried to control the solution. Arthur said that was the answer. I accused him of setting a trap. He had offered choices he knew I would refuse, then used my refusal as proof against me. He looked tired and said the choices had come from 5 different people. No one in the room had been working together against me. Wesley called from downstairs and asked whether Arthur needed help. Arthur told him to come up. While Wesley carried the first bag, I asked Arthur about Portugal. He said he had cancelled the hotel and train. The airline tickets would become credits in his account. He left the blue passport cover because it had my initials and could not be returned. I said cancelling everything before talking to me was another decision made alone. Arthur agreed. He said he was no longer planning our anniversary. He was arranging where to sleep while he decided whether he could live with me. They took the bags downstairs. I followed and reminded Wesley that he had heard only Arthur's version for 3 days. Wesley said he had also heard my version in the living room. Every guest had. Arthur paused at the door. He asked one last time if I would remove the post and tell the truth. I held my phone in my hand. The picture had more than 100 likes by then, most from people who did not know what had happened. Deleting it felt like handing the whole story to Fiona. I said no. Arthur nodded. There was no threat in his face. He said he would contact me when he was ready to discuss practical matters. Then he and Wesley left. I stood in the hall and opened the anniversary post again. The comments still called me beautiful, elegant, and lucky. The people who knew us best had not written a word. I told myself their silence would pass. Once Arthur calmed down, he would see that a marriage of 10 years was too large to end over one bed that nobody else had even slept in. The divorce became final 11 months after our anniversary. The papers used plain words about property, accounts, and dates. There was one line saying that the marriage could not be repaired. Nothing in the document mentioned Damien, the bedroom key, or the sentence I had spoken in front of our friends. Arthur rented a 2-bedroom apartment near his office. I stayed in the house for 4 months, but I could not carry the payment alone after we separated our finances. We sold it in the spring. I moved into a smaller rental across town. The new bedroom has no lock on the door. Our joint account was divided without a fight. Arthur kept his retirement savings and the flight credits. I kept mine and most of the furniture I had chosen. The anniversary party did not hide a financial trap. There was no secret deed and no last-minute bill. I simply learned how many ordinary costs Arthur had handled before I noticed them. The social change was quieter and harder. Nobody announced that I had been removed from the group. Invitations just began to reach Arthur first. Wesley and Fiona still held dinners. Maeve still attended. Gemma went too, after telling everyone that encouraging Damien's invitation had been careless. I was not banned, but people stopped trusting me with rooms where Arthur was expected to feel safe. Damien sent one message after the party. He said he hoped Arthur and I found a way to speak honestly, but he did not want further contact. He later moved back to Chicago for work. There was no second chance between us. I had not wanted one. That truth did not make the choice I made for him any kinder. My job remained mine. The school did not punish me for a private disaster, and I did not lose my title. Yet the night followed me into interviews. A few months later, a nervous father sat in my office and argued that his daughter had earned a place because every other option would be uncomfortable for the family. I heard my own anniversary sentence inside his demand. I told him that comfort was not proof of fairness. Then I stopped. For years, I had used similar language while assuming I was always the person qualified to decide whose discomfort mattered. After that meeting, I changed the way I trained my staff. We now ask who carries the cost of every solution and whether that person was allowed to speak. That was not an apology to Arthur. It was a lesson taken from him after he no longer needed it from me. The anniversary post came down after the separation became known, and the compliments beneath the cropped photographs started to feel foolish. I never published the correction. When people asked, I said we had both failed to communicate. That was true in the same way a cropped photograph was true. It showed part of the room and kept the important person outside the frame. Arthur went to Portugal the following summer with Wesley and Fiona. Maeve showed me one photograph because Porto looked beautiful, and she forgot, for a moment, that I might not want to see it. Arthur was standing near the river in a blue shirt, holding no one's hand. There was no replacement woman, no secret romance, and no victory planned behind my back. He had simply built a life in which he no longer had to prove love by accepting the place I assigned him. I understand now what his face meant when he held the key. He was not deciding whether Damien could enter a room. He was deciding whether the room, the surprise inside it, and the marriage around it were still shared. My answer came before he could ask the question aloud. That part I can admit. Arthur also disappeared into useful tasks and made me guess what he felt. Both things are true. What I have not managed to do is turn that second truth into an excuse that survives the first. The blue passport cover still sits on my side of the bed, stamped WR for a country I never saw.